Lynne Culbreth. Here we are. And we are on Zoom. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. Why don't you tell everyone where you're sitting right now?
I'm on an island called Bonaire. It's in the Caribbean. It's at the very bottom of the chain of Caribbean islands, right off the coast of Venezuela. So Bonaire is part of the ABC Islands. Aruba, Curacao is next, but Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao. And then on the map, you will see Aruba, Curacao, then Bonaire. But it's part of the Dutch Caribbean.
And you have been going down to Bonaire for most of your adult life. Is that correct?
No, for almost all of my whole
All
life,
of your.
because I started going when my uncle Bruce bought the property here in 1979. We
Okay.
came down, and then I've been coming regularly since.
Very cool. And tell me a little bit about what your uncle bought the property for.
So my uncle came to Bonaire in the early 70s. He was the first dive instructor on the island. So he's one of the original dive pioneers of the island. He got here, he worked under some other people first, and then decided to open his own place. So he bought the property in 1979 and he opened the Caribbean in 1980. So it's one of the oldest dive resorts on the island. And we celebrated, but this year would be the 43rd anniversary.
Wow. Did he build the property there, or was it an existing property that he reconditioned into what it is now?
This was just a house right on the waterfront. It was just a house that he converted into what it is now over time. So originally it was just a 2-story house. They lived in the bottom, they renovated the top and made that 2 separate rental units. There were sheds around the pool. They turned those into 3 separate rooms. They eventually built these, what we call the efficiency apartments on the way in, the dive shop, the retail shop. Then they picked up the property next door and they moved into that house, then turned where they had been living into another rental unit. There's another building that we call the bungalow. And then over time, he eventually bought a house that's on the adjacent property that we call the blue house. And then across the street, he bought the greenhouse that we call. So now there's 9 rooms and then 2 houses, a 3-bedroom and a 4-bedroom house. That's all part of the rental property. So no 2 rooms are the same. It's all like a unique, it's not like a cookie cutter, say Marriott, that's all the same rooms. Just it's a very unique, and that's why people feel like they're home. It's like a homey kind of feel.
And from what you've told me before, people come down year after year. They're there. Is it mostly for the diving, or is it also for just being on a Caribbean island?
No, Bonaire is definitely known for diving. And in fact, until recently, now that cruise ships are coming more and things like that, honestly, Bonaire was just always known for diving. Most people had never even heard of it. And his guests, I mean, he had a very, very loyal following. It's not unusual to walk around the property and ask people how long they've been coming, 20, 30 plus years, all the time. Like that's very common. And these people come every year religiously at, the second week in January in room 6 for 3 weeks or, whatever. And he's got a long, long time following.
Yeah.
And they make these plans. Like we can only open up reservations 2 years in advance because these people would actually book out probably 5 years in advance if you allow them. But we can only say 2 years max.
You're fully booked essentially for 2 years in advance?
No. There's definitely spaces. But some people, like the people that want their specific rooms at their specific times, they get those.
Okay.
Yeah. But so no, there's definitely still space. But it's fun.
Well, for anybody interested that would be listening, I'm going to put a link to your website. If nothing else, the pictures on the website are unbelievable. You've done a really good job with that. And
thanks.
We'll see if we can generate any business for you as well. But tell me about what growing up was like for you. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town in New Jersey. It's right on the Delaware River, which separates New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So we could walk to Pennsylvania in 5 minutes. So it's a
Okay.
very rural area, even though New Jersey, everyone thinks of as Newark, New Jersey. This area is very, very, very rural, very beautiful. But growing up, you're as a kid, you're thinking, oh, it's so boring or whatever. And
Mm,
looking back on it, oh, now I love going there and, realize like how cool it was to grow up there. But we're in the middle of New York City, Philadelphia, and the Pocono Mountains. So we could
okay.
easily go to New York, hour and a half to 2 hours. Philadelphia is like an hour and a half away. So we could have the benefits of the big cities,
Hmm.
but not actually live in the big cities. So
What
when we
types
had like,
of, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, just like when we had class field trips, like a lot of our field trips would go down to say Philadelphia, and you would see the Liberty Bell or where Betsy Ross was from or something, so we could access all that, go into New York for plays, a theater and things, but not have to like have the effects of that.
Yeah, that's pretty good. What types of activities or sports or hobbies were you involved with growing up?
I always loved gymnastics, always did gymnastics. Cheerleading in high school, did softball, field hockey, cheered, then just focused on gymnastics. So kind of everything.
Okay,
Not
so
like it is nowadays where you just pick one sport and do it. Like,
right.
and then when I graduated, I went to school in Wilmington, North Carolina, UNC Wilmington. And then I just walked on there to the swimming and diving team. So I swam and dove at Wilmington for 2 years.
Did you do gymnastics at UNCW?
No, they don't even have it.
Oh, is that
But
right?
but
How about
because they
that?
got because they got wind that I was a gymnast, so I was just swimming, and then they said, hey, come on over here to these diving boards, let's see. And then I started diving, which I'd never done before. Like I took one little course way back just to learn the basics, so I basically learned how to dive. Like
Wow.
springboard diving, not scuba diving, what we're doing now, but yeah,
Yep.
diving. So I did that for 2 years, which is fun.
You did enjoy that? Was there anything, I guess, scary or unnerving about it, or did it feel comfortable because of
No,
all your gymnastics experience?
it was completely scary because in in diving, nobody can spot you.
Yeah.
Nobody, and the water is a hard landing. It really is. I mean, you think it's not, but when you're spinning or whatever and you hit that water hard, no, it's very scary. So you just have to go for it. Yeah, no, it was a huge learning experience. It was fun, but it was challenging. That's for
Yeah, that
sure.
that comment though, you just have to go for it. Did you have to talk yourself to that edge, or did you feel like
Yeah.
I've seen enough gymnastics with my sister did it growing up, and my daughter's done it a little bit, that it's not easy. Like every part of that can be dangerous and hard, and you almost have to talk yourself into, yeah, I can do this. But
Oh, yeah.
so when you translated that to jumping off a diving board, was it easy to make that jump, or did you really have to work hard to talk yourself into it?
Well, the basics of it are, of course, like gymnastics, like flipping, spinning, like gymnastics.
Hmm.
But in gymnastics, you're always landing on your feet. In diving, you're always landing on your head. In gymnastics, you kind of want to get away from the equipment on dismounts and things. In diving, they want you in close to the board. So, I mean, there were some similarities, but
Yeah.
definitely some differences. And, I did not grow up doing that. I mean, we always went to the YMCA and, always played and dove off the boards there and did tons of flipping and things. So that part I was familiar with, but actually doing it in a formal setting where you're being judged and you have to do all the different dives, I learned all of it. But it got to the point where after my second year, where I really needed to step up a notch, that it was not going to be fun at that point, because I wasn't, it wasn't like this was my end all be all sport that
Hmm.
I would go to any length. And soon, like the danger and the scariness of it outweighed the fun of it.
Interesting. So it was enjoyable while it was a hobby, but
Yeah.
at some point it had to become a job, and you just didn't love it enough to.
No, to put And again,
Put the
I
work
hit
into
the
it.
board, there were times where
Oh my
I
gosh.
hit the board, my ponytail hit the board on some there were some things where I thought, okay, you know what? This has been fun, but again, this is not worth my life.
Yeah.
This is not a sport that I've, grown up to having, but it's fun to do it. And then when I got out of school, that was in Wilmington, North Carolina. Then I moved to Raleigh. Then I went and worked at a gym. So I went back into the gymnastics field.
Okay.
I was program director at one of the gyms in Raleigh. And then I stayed in that field ever since. Some sort of gymnastics, tumbling, cheerleading. So I was glad to always be in that sport.
Gotcha. Well, that whole story though, to me tells something about your character. You're up for new things, you're up for challenges, and even if it's hard and scary, you're still willing to do it. And I can see that in what I know about other parts of your life, that's kind of a consistent thread. Now, tell me about how did you go from that working at a gym to running a gym?
I was working at that gym. I had been there for 5 years. It was a not small gym, but it's a mom and pop business. And there really wasn't going to be anywhere else I could go. I was already program director, so there wasn't a whole lot more I could do. I could just basically stay at that position forever. And I had been doing private lessons with one family, and that mom said to me, have you ever thought about opening your own gym? And I said, yeah, but I'd have to go in on a big scale, and I don't think I can do that. And then she said, how about cheerleading? Because that's really, at that point, gaining popularity. Now cheerleading is huge, but at that
Yeah.
point it was like, okay. And I said, okay, how about maybe cheerleading and tumbling? Because a lot of kids loved tumbling,
Mm-hmm.
but didn't always like the equipment. So we said, you know what, that might be something. So then she and I got together. She was a former cheerleader at NC State, but back in the day. So she was kind of familiar with cheerleading. But then we had friends who were cheerleaders at NC State that we were able to hire, to
Okay.
coach that. I did all the tumbling, and we had a lot of kids. I mean, we had kids that were definitely interested in cheerleading, but we had huge tumbling interest of kids that just like to come in and flip around for an hour.
So,
Even
I
if they didn't
mean,
use it for
you,
cheerleading.
you had never run a business before that, though.
No, no.
Was that a huge learning curve?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, because, it's all the laws, the employee laws, the financial part of it with a business. It's all those background things that you don't see.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
could definitely get on the floor and coach, no problem, teach all of that. But then, right, you've got to run the business side of it.
Yeah. That's why most businesses fail, is because there's a book out there called The E-Myth, but the author calls it an entrepreneurial spasm. Like, people have these great ideas and yeah, I can go do that. And they start it and then realize that oh yeah, I got to do payroll and I have to pay
Right.
taxes, and there's
Right.
worker employee laws that I have to follow. And all of that stuff has to happen before you even can get to doing the things that you got in the business to do in the first place. And so
Oh, yeah.
it's an easy way
Well,
to get tripped up.
right. And so my original partner, she had a family, and within the first year, she said, oh, I didn't realize what all was involved with this. I need to get
Oh,
out.
really?
I'm not, because, the kids are coming to the gym after school through the evening. That was when she was always home with her kids after school through the evenings. So suddenly she can't be at home to be a mom because she needs to be at the gym running
Yeah.
the business.
Yep.
So she left after a year. We brought on someone who had been coaching with us. She bought into it. And even after a year, she decided it wasn't for her. So yeah, that's a prime example of just people don't know what they're getting themselves into. And then she backed out. I was a year by myself. And then I picked up my final set of partners. They had just graduated from NC State. They cheered at NC State, which is a huge cheerleading program. And then they were my partners for the final 3 years until they decided to get out, at which point I said, that's fine. And then we sold the gym.
I see. Okay. But you stuck to it through all of that, which,
Yeah.
that shows, I don't know what the word is, gumption, or I would assume that you probably love doing it also. Otherwise you wouldn't have stuck with it. Is that accurate?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, we loved our families. And your sister was part of it. She came in. That's how I know your family.
Right.
But, you know, sh- she came in with her school group. So, yeah, I mean, we have, and to this day, so many of those families are still friends of mine, still so special to me. You know, the kids that we coach now have kids, and they're all into gymnastics and cheerleading because I see them all online. But, you know, cat. So the name of the business, of course, was CATS, which stood for Cheer and Tumble School. So many people to this day still thank me for the days of CATS because it
Hmm.
meant so much to them in their lives and with their families, with their kids, and just they all developed a lot of friendships. The moms, you know,
Yeah.
are still friends to this day. A lot of them. The
That's
kid
cool.
made great friends. So yeah, like it's something that lasted on, and I'm still friends with a lot of the parents. It's fun to still keep in touch with them and hear from them. They'll say to me, "Oh, it was so special. Our days of at Cats, we'll never forget that. That was just such a great time in our lives." So yeah, it
Yeah.
really was a
So that's
special
interesting.
time.
One of the things I pull out of that though is that you took a risk. You did. Starting a business and running it are extremely difficult and challenging. And what you got out of it that was lasting was not the business, it was the relationships.
Oh
And
yeah,
I love that, because that's where you kind of find the gold in anything, is what relationships you get out of it. And
right.
so you've stayed in touch with them, but I know that in the next phase or two of your life, those didn't necessarily carry over. So let me transition a little bit to the diving, not off of a board, but now diving into deep waters.
Scuba dive.
Scuba diving, yeah. And you mentioned your uncle earlier that got you into this, but tell me about a little bit about the history of your diving experience, and then I want to ask you some more details around some of the more challenging dives that you've done.
So I started coming to Bon Air in 1979, and that was just when my uncle Bruce bought the property. And then we were still kids, like I was 11 at that time. And then when I came back, we started diving. He would just take me out with him. If the boat was going out, I'd go out, and then I would just dive a little bit with him. And then I got officially certified in 1985, but I was diving prior to that. So then, yeah, then just from coming here regularly, now I'm up to over 1,600 dives
Oh, wow.
because I've just been diving my whole life coming here. I've dove other places, but majority of my dives have been here.
So to even have a number, that means you keep track of it. And this is a really naive question, but is the tracking your dives, is that required for your
It's
license, or is that just something you've done?
no, it's not required, but you have a logbook that
Okay.
they encourage you to keep. A lot of people don't want to bother with it. I always did, and I'm glad I did because now I know, how many dives I have. My next goal is to go add up all the time that I've spent underwater
Oh, wow, that would
and
be
see
cool.
how long, because some people have done that, and it's kind of neat. Like one of our instructors here, she's been working here for over 30 years, but she got to the point like she kept track of all that. So she knew when she hit 1 year underwater of her life. So I would
That's
like to
crazy
see
to
where
me.
I am on time because so you keep your logbook, but the thing about that is that people can go and do a dive and write it down, say, and do a 30-minute dive and then do 4 of those a day. So, it looks like 4 big dives. Where I, on the other hand, go out and a lot of times I dive for 90 minutes, 100 minutes or something. So, but then I'll only have one dive.
I
So
see.
it can be deceiving sometimes only because I may have 1,600 and some dives, but the time I've spent underwater is probably a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like
You
it.
know, someone
So
else could have 1600 and not have nearly the amount of time because they do short dives.
I gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. If you ever add that up, you need to let me know because that would be fascinating. That is a lot of time underwater, not breathing the air that is freely available.
Yep.
Uh, so tell me about maybe the most challenging dive that you've ever done. And was there any point, whether that dive or some other dive, where things went south real quick and you weren't sure if there was a moment of where you weren't sure how it was going to turn out?
No, I wouldn't say there's been any really scary dives, thank goodness. Just because I think I was always diving with my Uncle Bruce,
Okay.
who always made sure I stayed safe. And I think because with him, he was so experienced that I was always in good hands. So
Mhm.
that was never, but probably the most challenging dives that I've done were dives to a wreck here on Bonaire called the Windjammer, which is 180 feet down. And that's a deep dive. That's a very deep dive. We did this back in the day before, dive computers now are common. Everyone has a dive computer. It calculates everything for you, how long you can stay at certain depths, if you need to do decompression stops, where you need to do that things. This was back in the day before computers, before just any fancy gear and things like that. People do this dive now and they consider it to be a big tech dive. They come in with all these tanks and tons of sophisticated equipment. I mean, we did this on just a normal tank and my uncle's stopwatch
My
going by the
gosh.
tables, the old fashioned tables where you have to figure out the times. So, and the funny thing is, I didn't even realize it till recently. I looked back at my logbooks and we, the first time I went there was my 21st dive, which I mean, some people wouldn't even do that in a lifetime, but they certainly don't do it in the very beginning. But I dove enough, and my uncle obviously would never put me in jeopardy, so he knew we could do it, and I was with him. But yeah, I mean that was a deep dive, and I was just what I think 17 years old at the time or
Oh my
something.
gosh.
Yeah,
That I mean that sounds pretty gnarly, and it obviously turned out okay. But maybe explain to us what kind of stuff can go wrong at 180 feet down.
a lot of things could go wrong, and if you had any kind of equipment failure, yeah, equipment failure, because you need that equipment when you're underwater.
Yeah.
Something happened to your regulator, which is where you breathe. You could, if you're not watching, you could run out of air. If you start panicking, and when you're that deep, you cannot just shoot up to the top. Like that's extremely dangerous to do that.
What
So
happens if you do?
I mean, if you pop to the top, you could have an embolism, like you could basically throw up your lungs.
Oh, geez. So
It's
there's no
very
quick
dangerous.
rescue
No,
if
I mean,
you
you could get,
panic or something goes wrong at that kind of depth.
yeah, that kind of depth, you can't panic. Or if you do, you have to stay in control and get up to safe areas to get to the top. But that's why
So
you learn in diving that you have buddies that
yeah.
you have what's called an octopus, which is an extra regulator on your set. So say my regulator went down, I would take my Uncle Bruce's octopus, his spare regulator, and I could breathe off that. So like there's systems in place for diving for those purposes.
Okay. Yeah, and I see now why doing that on your 21st dive is a little bit risky because to not panic in that situation, it seems like you'd have to have some sort of slow exposure to the risks so that it seems more and more normal. But I know you trusted your uncle explicitly,
Yeah. And I
and
was
that
17. What
probably
did I
kept
know?
what it right.
I think a lot of it is just that you're 17, you're like, okay, everything's
Yeah.
great. You don't
Hell
think
yeah,
of
I
all
can do
those things.
this.
I think when, like in everything, and this is what I experienced in teaching swim and teaching gymnastics, everything, the older people get, the more you rationalize things and realize, oh, I can get hurt in this. I can, whatever. this could go wrong. So when you're younger and just carefree, you don't think of that. I mean, I didn't think of that. I was
Yeah.
just having a good time diving. He said, "Oh, let's go do the windjammer." And okay, and I knew he wouldn't have me do it if he didn't think I could do it.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, looking back on it, it was relatively early in my diving career to do
Yes.
that. And we did
So
it several times.
after 1,600 dives, what keeps you doing it now? What do you get out of doing it at this point?
I just love diving. And Bonaire, the diving is so easy that you can just, especially where I am now, living here at the resort, our house is right on the water. I mean, I can throw on a tank, walk off our dock, jump in, and go dive, and then just come back, put my tank in, get it filled. It's just so easy, but it's fun because you never know what you're going to see. And there's so much out there, especially Bonaire. Bonaire has been a protected marine park for, I guess, like 40 or 50 years now. So Bonaire is just filled with so many kinds, colors, shapes, you name it, fish. Like the fish, there's just so much of it. And the corals, tons of coral, again, different sizes, shapes, everything. So every time you go down, you just don't know what you're going to see. Maybe a eagle ray goes by, or a big turtle goes by, or you look in a little hole and there might be a really cool baby, some sort of fish that, you don't ever see the babies, and you look down and think, oh my gosh, that's a baby trunk fish, for instance, like another. So you just don't know what you're going to see. And Bonaire is known for its macro, the small things. Some places you go in the world are known for big animals, and Bonaire is not known for that. So you're not going to see tons of sharks. I mean, we rarely ever even see a shark. You're not going to see the big stuff, but the macro, the little things are so fascinating, and you
That's cool.
never know what you're going to find
So
in every crack, crevice, everywhere.
It's an element of exploring every time you go out, and because it's so diverse, you explore something new even after 1,600 dives.
Yeah, and every time, and I go with the mindset, like, many times, to this day, I go underwater and think, how cool is this? Here I am in a gigantic aquarium, and I can do this, that I can be underwater in this complete different world than above water, and experience just all of this. Like, it's such a neat thing.
It probably does. I mean, I can see how it feels completely otherworldly. That surface line is almost like it transports you to a completely different place.
Yeah, like you're in a big aquarium, and
Wow.
you're the outside person. Like, you're coming into their world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, like I said, Bonaire has always been so protected that long ago they set up Stanapa, it's called. So they're the marine park, and they have protected Bonaire. I've been to other places where it was very fished out. There's no coral reefs left and things, but Bonaire has always been very protected. So you're swimming, and just all the fish come right next to you because they don't care. I think they know they're protected. So they just swim right in front of you. And again, you're in their world, and they just swim there. They're not afraid of you. I mean, not, if you're just acting normal, like if you go after them, obviously they'd be afraid. But in general, like, you're just among them and carrying on, looking at them. They just crossed in front of you. Here comes another fish. Here, there's just stuff going on all the time.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, tell me a little bit about how everything kind of changed in 2020 for you.
So 2020 pandemic, my Uncle Bruce was down here. My Aunt Liz had passed away in October 2019. So she had just passed away. My Uncle Bruce was here. The island shut down at the end of March because they tried to keep it in a bubble from the pandemic. So he was here doing a project around the inn and fell, hit his head, and 5 days later passed away. So it was very shocking because my Uncle Bruce was in great health, would have gone on for another probably 20 some years had that not happened. So I got the phone call, and my Uncle Bruce was basically like the father I never had. Our father left our family when we were really young, never to be seen again. So we just had a very small family. He was the father I never had. So I've spent tons of time down here to be with him. And then also, of course, to enjoy the diving and everything else Bonaire has to offer. They always said, people always asked, like, would I take over if he ever retired and things? So in my mind, I thought, I guess, I don't know. Like, we'll have to see where we are in life at that point. And again, I'm thinking my uncle's going to live to be 95.
Right.
People would ask my Uncle Bruce if I would take over. My brother and sister don't come here really. My sister used to a little bit more. My brother's only been once. So they were definitely not an option. But, people would say, oh, will Lynne take over for you? And my Uncle Bruce would say, I'm never going to retire. You can't retire when you love doing something. So he would never really face it and say, I'm going to retire on X date and then be done with this. So there was never really going to be any official start and stop probably. And when that happened, suddenly there was. And immediately he had willed the inn to my sister, brother, and me. And again, my sister and brother would definitely not be able to come. And immediately I just said, I will go. I will definitely go and run that. I mean, he established this business. That was the 40-year anniversary. I know what he has put into this place, truly through blood, sweat, and tears. And I could never just walk away. And again, there's so much loyalty amongst the clientele here that I know they too were worried, what's going to happen to this now that Bruce is gone. So I think everybody was really happy to know that it stayed in the family. I came down, took over, that I'd always come here my whole life, knew the Caribbean very, very well, would carry on basically his legacy.
Mm-hmm.
There was never a question that I would not do it.
Did you know he had willed the inn to you and your siblings?
Yeah, it was interesting because back when my Aunt Liz had passed away in October of 2019, so they passed away within 7 months of each other. Wow. When she had passed away, I was here. I came down the very next day, and he went out and did his will and came back and told me what was in the will. So thank goodness
he didn't have a will before that?
No. And thank goodness he got that done. Told me, said, you're going to be executor of the will. I have willed this to you, my sister and brother. And even at that time, I said, would you want us to run it? And he said, would you want to? And I said, I guess. I don't, know where we're going to be at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff. So, yeah, it was just, thankfully, it worked out the way it did with him having the will and that he and I had talked about some of it ahead of time.
That's a real gift because it could have been a real mess. And it may have worked out, but it would have been much more difficult and potentially risk the survivability of the business if it had been too difficult. So
for sure.
That is very fortunate. Now, it sounds like you didn't hesitate to make the decision to go take over and run it. Have you wondered or second guessed that at all in the last 2 years, or with any challenges, or you feel totally locked in, like this is where you're supposed to be?
Like it was definitely, there's been definite challenges along the way, but there was never a doubt that I would come take over. Never a doubt. And really, you got to remember, so when he passed away, that was May of 2020. Pandemic was still going on. I couldn't even get here. We couldn't even be here for his funeral. I mean, we had to watch it through a live stream. And the first I could get here was in November. So I was trying to do things from a distance, like up in Raleigh. I was in touch with the staff all the time, but I wasn't even able to physically get here till November of that year. And then the island didn't really open up until June of 2021. So I got here, which was actually then a blessing with the pandemic, because then we had a chance to figure out what was going on. And my uncle did everything here. That was the other thing. He did it all. So when he passed away, suddenly everybody's standing there like, now what? Because he knows everything about this place. So there's, any questions we had, whatever, there was no one to ask. I mean, we had to just figure a lot of it out. But he has a very long tenured staff. So they knew, most of the things. Yeah. But he had done so much of it that, to this day, things come up and we all have to piece it together. And the workers might say, oh, yeah, I remember when Bruce put this electrical box in here and blah, 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 or why he did it or something. And it's like, okay, you know, so no, there's been definite challenges. But fortunately, there's a great staff here that has helped me every step of the way, for sure.
Would you say this is one of the biggest challenges you've ever tackled or taken on in your life?
By far,
Really?
by far. Because, you know, I had no preparation for this. You know, I thought if I ever took it over that my Uncle Bruce would still be here, that we would, you know, make the transition together. I could run over to the house and ask him questions. He could tell me different things. So for him to just suddenly be gone and then me have to take over, you know, as much as I came here, which thank goodness I grew up coming here and knew it as well as I did. So I was in a good position for a bad situation, but I was in the best position I probably could have been in. But it's very different. I mean, we've got the hotel, you know, the inn, and a full retail shop and a full dive operation with 2 boats, compressors, tanks, the works.
So
So
that's really like 3 different businesses.
yeah, there's a lot going on, you know, and again, when I came here, I came for myself on vacation to have fun. You know, I ran around, did my diving, but I didn't know. I mean, picture any sport that you enjoy doing, like, you know, your thing, say you were a ski buff. Okay. So, you know, what your skis are, and, you know, you go to a resort and you stay at the, but suddenly think about being just dumped into your lap of, oh, now you have to go run the ski resort. You have to know all the different equipment, all the different brands. You have to, there's a lot to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot more than I knew. I mean, you know, people come in and ask about the different gear, like the regulators or the dive computers and things. I mean, I know my stuff, but do I know all of the brands? No.
So it's a bit of a baptism by fire, even though you grew up or spent most of your life around this
Yeah,
operation. You got thrown in the deep end for sure.
big time. Like there was, and again, no warning.
No
So it
warning.
wasn't like
Yeah.
we knew this was coming. And on top of all of it, this is a Dutch country. So now we're in a foreign land. Like Dutch laws are very, very different than US laws. I mean, they're very different. So the things you can do in the US do not fly here a lot of times.
Interesting. So what have you learned about yourself through tackling this challenge? Because you didn't have to, right? I'm sure you felt an element of responsibility and loyalty to your uncle to do it, but you didn't have to. Nobody required you to do it. So you're choosing to take on this challenge and to do something really, really difficult that you weren't planning on in that moment. So what have you learned about yourself through the whole process?
I think I've learned to just take it one day at a time and not try to overwhelm myself with a gigantic mountain, and just try to take it step by step. Because when I got here, you know, it was a scary thought of, okay, now I'm just going to pick up and move to Bonaire and run this thing. So I looked at it and thought, okay, I'll just go. I will give it my best. You know, I'm not going to just walk away from it, but we'll see what happens. And if it fails after trying, that's one thing. But I'm not just going to walk away from it and just let it fail. So I think getting here, it's just been one day at a time, and every day is a learning experience. Again, you know, all of a sudden today, something might happen with the electricity, say in a room, and suddenly we tackle that project and I learned about the electricity in that room. Or tomorrow is some other crisis that suddenly we learn about that one. You know, so I think some of it is I probably didn't even know all that I was getting into. That's probably the biggest thing, is I didn't know everything that it would take.
Yeah.
You know, then, you know, say if I knew now what it was going to take, and I still would have taken it on. But, you know, you almost
may have thought a little bit longer about taking it on.
Yeah. So now looking back, I'm like, oh gosh, I didn't realize it was going to be all these things. You know, I just came down and thought, okay, here we go. Yeah. But again, there's great staff here that help, but it's definitely been a challenge. And again, I think the hardest part, well, a couple of hard things, is that, you're under Dutch law. So everything government wise that comes in, so you're trying to run this business, everything that comes in is written in Dutch. So I have to forever use Google Translate to try to figure out what all these things say,
Oh
because I
my
have no
gosh.
idea. And then also too, with his staff, he has a lot of locals, right? Bonarians, and they speak Papiamento, which is the local dialect, Spanish, Dutch, and English. That's what most of the locals on the island speak, 4 languages. So, the local ones definitely speak Papiamento, but might have like broken English. So trying to communicate with them. We have one of our workers, Edward, is deaf, so he doesn't speak at all, right? So you have to communicate with him. Another one is Spanish. He's from Colombia, South America, and he doesn't really speak English. So I've tried to have staff meetings, and it's so funny because all of a sudden I realize half the people don't know what I'm saying. One of them can't even hear me. This guy doesn't even speak, and I only speak English.
Oh my gosh.
So that's another big challenge too, is just, again, communicating even with the employees here to get points across. It's just a constant juggling act. It
Yeah.
really is.
Well, you've taken on one of a very difficult thing, which is to make a business survive. And you've done it with added degrees of difficulty, almost with, your hands tied behind your back, and you still got to run the business. The financial side has to work. The operation side has to work. And you're doing it in a country with a language barriers and legal barriers that you've had to figure out along the way too. So I'm super impressed. I think thinking in terms of your shoes, I know every day feels probably very difficult to figure these things out, but there's got to be an element of reward and kind of feeling good about yourself for being able to do this really, really difficult thing.
Yeah, there is. And I think every single day, somebody either comes into the shop, because my uncle was really well known for repairs. So, we have a lot of regulars that come in that just even come to the shop, that either always get their t-shirts here every trip, or always bring their gear in to get fixed. So there's a lot of those people. And then all the guests who have been coming here, I had to fill big fins, as we would say in the dive industry, with my Uncle Bruce to sort of prove that we're okay, everything's going to be fine, the caravan is going to carry on, do not worry. So, with the guests, they have all come in and thanked me. He told me many stories about my Uncle Bruce. The people who even come into the shop thank me. They too tell me different stories about my Uncle Bruce. So it's been rewarding. It really is. I mean, to have somebody actually come in and say, thank you for continuing this. This has been our home away from home for the last 30 years. We can't imagine not coming here.
Yeah.
And, and I know what that feeling would be like if I couldn't come here, because I've grown up coming here. I get that. I would have been crushed too. So it is rewarding. I mean, they thank me, and there's days where we get through things, and at the end of the day, I look back and think, oh my gosh, okay, we conquered that, So there's been a lot of things where personally I look and think, I am so proud of what we've done. I'm so pleased with the direction things are going. We've made lots of nice little improvements that people have noticed, and I'm proud of that. Like, I really feel like my Uncle Bruce would be proud.
Yeah, I think you would too.
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. And really in just 3 years that you've been able to figure this out. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you did this coming out of a pandemic on top of all those other challenges. So
you're right. Right.
You're just going to be skiing downhill from here on. It's just going to get easier and easier.
I hope. Well, I am getting the hang of things. And it's funny because now, like, I can sit in the office, and when certain things come in, I'm like, okay, now I know how to handle this. Now I know how to, file these tax things with the government. Now I know these things. Like, I sometimes even sit back and think, oh my gosh, look how far you have come. To myself, even I say, I recognize that. I know that I've learned a tremendous amount. And
Yeah.
the fact that now it's an everyday thing for me, I'm like, oh, wow. A year ago, I'd be like, what is this
Yeah.
government paper? I don't even know how to, file this monthly tax for sales tax or, whatever. So yeah, I'm pleased with things. I really am.
Well, that's good. And I mean, you just kind of alluded to it a second ago, but the kind of the self-talk that we give ourselves matters. And it sounds like you're encouraging yourself. And I would imagine in those really hard times, do you have a kind of a go-to mantra or thing that you do to encourage yourself to keep taking the next step?
Well, I think there's been many times where I've kind of beat myself up, feeling like I didn't know things or something. And then I remind myself that I did not choose this. This was not like I sat up in Raleigh and said,
Mm,
hey, I think I'll just go open a dive shop in the Caribbean. I think I'll just add a hotel onto it too. And, throw in. And I have to like remind myself not to be so hard on myself,
yeah.
because there's been times where I have been. And then I think, Lenny, you don't know all these things, but you also didn't come in saying you knew it all. I don't walk
Mm-hmm.
around here at all. I reach out for help all the time. I do not walk around here and tell everybody I know everything. Don't tell me anything. I know it all already. I'm the
Mm-hmm.
first one to ask every staff person, how do we do this? Like, show me this, teach me this. I have gotten, I think, kinder to myself of not beating myself up, feeling like I don't know it all. Because again, no one knew this was coming. There was
Yeah.
no transition. And it's not like, again, I didn't choose to pick up some random business that I didn't know anything about.
Right.
And, like people will do that. But it wasn't like I chose, and yes, I chose to come here. That's different. But I'm saying that I didn't out of the blue just think, I think I'll just go open a dive
Yeah.
shop in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So
That seems very solid, grounding, and a healthy way to approach a really big, difficult challenge. It seems almost necessary. Like if the flip of that was that you had all this negative self-talk and you had all this doubt that you let control your decision making,
yeah,
I don't know how you would be able to pull this off, honestly. So
right.
I mean,
I mean,
as a independent third party sitting back and watching you do this, I'm super impressed because you've
oh,
done a very difficult thing that, and with many exit ramps along the way, you could have said, you know what, I'm done and just tap out, and you haven't done that.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's definitely been challenging, and I definitely remind myself that I'm doing the best that I can. And
Yeah.
that's all I can do. I mean, I'm trying to do the best that I can. I've got a lot going on. The inn runs 24/7. So, it'd be one thing if it was just the dive shop that was 8 to 5 every day. You've got your divers in, out,
Yeah.
whatever. But,
Yeah.
then, I mean, it's not uncommon for somebody at 8 o'clock at night. Oh, something's wrong with our room, something that, so it runs 24/7.
Yeah.
This whole place does. And that's been a lot. There's
Yeah.
really no day off. I live on the property. So even if I have a day off, which I have scheduled days off, but when I do that, even if I'm just like walking out to the car to go to the grocery store, I see guests along the way. So I'm always on. And then,
Always on.
yeah, the guests will even say, oh, hey, and ask me a question and things. So, yeah, I'm always on. It is definitely
Yeah.
24/7.
Gotcha.
But
And I can
yeah,
see how you're running your gym before that. There wasn't a whole lot of time off from that either, I'm sure. So
yeah, no.
you kind of look back and see these different mile markers through life that point to the exact spot that you got to right now that make it seem not quite as random.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
that's
again,
really
all I can do is try my best. I mean, that's
try
all
your
I can do at
best.
this point. I remind
That's
myself
a
that
really
I
good.
did not know this was coming. I did not choose this, that I can only do my best, and I can only
Yeah.
do but so much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like I'm 24 years old and can say, oh, got tons of energy and this and that. I mean, yeah, I've had to just find
Just
the
do your
energy
best.
and do my best. And every day it's just, we'll see where this goes. I haven't made any big timelines. People would say, how long are you going to go down there for? Or are you going to be there forever? And I'd say, I don't know. I mean, really, it's take it day by day, see where everything goes, see how the business goes. Maybe none of the regular clients will be back. Maybe the customers will say, we're not coming back. But now we've seen them all returning, and I'm thrilled about that.
Yeah,
But we didn't
great.
know what would happen.
Yep.
And pandemic, all of that. Like, it's been a couple of very strange years. So we didn't know what would happen, but it was just like, you know what? I'm going to get there and I'm just going to see how it goes. Again, by not putting a deadline on it, of saying, okay, if it doesn't work in 6 months, something, it was just kind of like, just see how it goes. If I don't like it, then we can sell it. We're in no worse place than we were in to start with my uncle passing away. Or maybe it'll be great and I'll stay for however long. But I, just don't put any deadlines on it. Like, I just say, just see how it goes.
Yeah.
Because you know what? You never know. I think that's what I've learned more than anything in life, is like, you never know. And to put deadlines on things, life never works out the way you think it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's like
you've
many
accepted
curveballs.
the uncertainty of the whole venture.
Yeah. I mean, I never in a million years would I've ever guessed that was how my Uncle Bruce was going to die. Never. I mean, he was 73 going on 33. He ran around this place, still building, doing it, he had so much energy, was in great health. I never would have dreamt. This is the guy that would walk up to me, his leg would be bleeding, and I'd say, what'd you do to your leg? And he'd say, oh, I don't know. I hit it on a board. And he'd be bleeding. I'd say, well, maybe you should clean it up. But that's how, I mean, honest to God, like, I did not think, I thought my uncle was indestructible.
Yeah.
So for him to go down with this random head injury, it was like, what? I never would have dreamt that in my wildest dreams.
That's crazy. That is crazy.
Never.
Well, let me bring the boat back to the dock here. And I got a couple other questions and we can finish up here, but this helps me understand you a little bit better. But if you had an entire day with none of the responsibilities that you just mentioned, none of the people asking for something from you, and the entire day you could do whatever Lynne wanted for your own sake, what would you do with that day?
Well, I would probably actually go diving, because I don't get to go diving so much now, because honestly, I'm in the office.
Yeah.
When I came here on vacation, I got to dive every single day. Now I'm actually working. I'm in the office. So I enjoy diving. So I would probably go diving, definitely. And then I even like I have puzzles here that I love. And so I like just sitting at the table, doing these puzzles, getting lost in my thoughts. We're right on the water. So my puzzle table is right in front of a window that looks out on the Caribbean Sea. So
that's not terrible.
The crystal clear blue water. So, like, just to kind of like do a puzzle, get lost in the day, not have people bothering me. Not that they're bothering me, but not have
I know what you mean.
the distractions and things. And so I just simple things like that. And then
That's
diving,
cool.
again, I'd like to dive. So I'd like to go whenever I get a chance, just to stay up on it and to, enjoy myself. It's a good recreational activity.
That's a great answer. And I think very in line with what I know about you as a person. So if nothing else, you're being consistent.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Last question. What is there a great adventure, a big, bold thing that you still have on your list to do that you haven't done? Is it another 180-foot dive, or is it traveling somewhere in the world that you've never been to? What would you say is your biggest adventure that you've yet to do?
Well, I've always traveled a lot, and I actually have gone to like a lot of the places that I've wanted to go to. There's always tons more places to go. I mean, that would be fun. So traveling's always on the horizon. That's a given. Except right now, it's just like, okay, thank goodness I traveled a lot up until now, because now I need to focus on this for a little bit. Traveling is going to take a little bit of a back seat so I can focus on this. So I don't even know. Honestly, again, I've kind of stopped making these huge plans, just because I've realized you just don't know what's coming. So I just see what comes up. If somebody comes and says, hey, do you want to do a trip to so-and-so somewhere? Or do you want to, then it's like, oh, sure. But I've been a lot of places. So it's not like I haven't traveled my whole life. So I've gotten that not out of the way because I will always love traveling. But
Right.
so right now there's nothing majorly urgently pressing that I can think of because
That's
I'm
a
just
really good
focused
answer
on this.
though, and there's a time and a place for goals and things where we're shooting for the future, but what you just described is really existing and living in the moment and being
Yeah.
present with everything that's happening around you and fully experiencing that. And that's, in the last hour that we've talked, I've gathered that 100% from what you said. So
Yeah, because
that's
you don't know what's going to happen. And,
right.
there's people, so we get people here from all over the world. So you never know who will come and say, oh, hey, come visit me in some place, or I don't know. Like, you just don't know what's going to come. So
Yeah.
I don't want to set up these great big, I mean, there's always like places I'd like to go and things on my list,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. I almost hate to put all my eggs in one basket, be like, this is like make it or break it. If I don't ever
Yeah.
get here,
Yeah. Yeah.
at this point, it's like, you know what? We'll see what happens. I mean, I've had a lot of great opportunities and experiences throughout my life where, a friend would say, hey, do you want to go to Cape Town, South Africa? And it was like, oh, okay. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
thinking that, but okay, I'll go with you.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of different, to like have any major plans, no, because I didn't know I was going to be here. So maybe if
Mm.
I had a big plan, that would have been dashed because I'd
Yeah.
have to be here and then I'd be disappointed. So I don't know. I don't kind of live like that. I think I just sort of live with take it as it comes. Lots of good things come up, lots of things that are unexpected, and you just sort of roll with it.
Yeah.
Take advantage of
And
it when you can.
so again, going back through everything that you've said, even to that last point, there's a common thread of, I guess you would call it like serendipity. You've lived through the serendipity of each of these moments, and there's probably a lot of fun in that. So
Yeah,
I think
because
that's pretty cool.
I look back on my whole life and I never would have imagined my entire life, actually. Like, I never would have thought I would have owned a cheerleading and tumbling school. I never thought, like some of the other places I've worked or things, I ran my own private lesson swim business the last 10 years prior to coming here. I never would have guessed that. And I look back and just think it has all worked out for the best.
Mm-hmm.
And even at times where a door has been closed, a window has opened, and at the time you're thinking, oh gosh, what am I going to do? Yet something else happens, it comes along. And even really, again, with my swim business, I had just lost my indoor pool space. I was kind of thinking, all right, what am I going to do now? And then really not long after, this whole opportunity opened.
Wow.
So
Wow.
and again, I never would have guessed this. So,
Yeah.
a lot of it, I never would have guessed. It's all worked out for the best. Even the bad things have in a way worked out for the best. So at this point, I just think, okay, just keep going because I don't know.
Just keep
I
going.
don't know what's coming. And I don't want to set myself up for disappointment or whatever. I
Yeah.
just go with it and look back on it and think that was a great opportunity, a great learning experience, or a great whatever,
Yeah.
and see the good in it all.
That's really cool. Let's end on that note because I think that's a really good spot to wrap it up. And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. If people want to find the Carib Inn online, what is the website for the inn?
It is Carib, CaribInn, caribin.com.
Very easy. And
Yeah.
I believe you've got some pictures from the shore on your Instagram feed.
Yeah. Yep.
And
Yep. And
how
on
can
our
find?
Facebook page, we put a
Oh, you have
lot
a
up on our
Facebook
Facebook
page.
page
Okay,
too.
so what are the handles or the spots where people can find you on either of those?
The Facebook page is under, I'm sure it's under Bruce Bowker's Carib Inn. So Bruce Bowker is Bowker apostrophe S, Carib Inn. But I think probably if you put in Carib Inn, it should pull up. And then Instagram is Caribbean, one word.
Okay.
Yeah, we
That's
put up
easy to,
lots of fun things, everything going on around here, lots of great sunset pictures and just
yeah, those
things
are
around the
something
city.
else.
Yeah, yeah. My uncle picked a very good spot, I have to say. He really did. And
All
every
right,
day I go
Lenny.
out and enjoy the sunset.
Well, that's pretty fantastic. I really appreciate you've been super generous with your time because I know you've got like a million other things happening behind you in the last hour and a half that we've been talking. So thank you for doing this. I really do appreciate it. And we will talk soon.
Oh, thanks, Josh. It's been a joy, as always.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. I'll see you soon.
All right. Bye, Josh.
Bye.